Hello friends, welcome to Ecoholics YouTube channel. My name is Avinash Agarwal and in this video I will be discussing with you economics current affairs for 5th September 2024. So friends, मैंने आपके लिए आज एक ही आर्टिकल सिलेक्ट करा है from today's newspaper and we have a leftover from yesterday's discussion, right? So दो डिस्कशन हमारे आज हो जाएंगे, दो आर्टिकल्स, वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट डिस्कशंस, बहुत नेक्स्ट लेवल का आर्टिकल सिलेक्ट करा है, राइट? इंडिया के अंदर एक बहुत बड़ा प्रॉब्लम है दोस्तों, राइट? वो है पॉवर्टी, इनइक्वालिटी, कास्टिज्म, राइट? और इन तीनों का जब इंटरमिंगलिंग हम करते हैं, व्हेन वी लुक एट द इंटरसेक्शन ऑफ पॉवर्टी, इनइक्वालिटी एंड कास्टिज्म, राइट? सो वी सी हाउ डिफिकल्ट दिस प्रॉब्लम इज, राइट? So there is this very rich and insightful article which has been published in today's newspaper, which is talking about this issue, right? So I'll be discussing that first and foremost with you guys, okay? And subsequently फिर मैं क्या करूँगा कि ये वाला discussion जब हो जाएगा, then I will pick up what is left over from yesterday's discussion and I will discuss that article as well on pension reforms in India, right? So that is the agenda of today's discussion. I hope that this is clear. There was a question that was asked by I think Komal, तो उन्होंने कल एक कमेंट डाला था वीडियो के नीचे regarding a doubt based on yesterday's discussion. So I had addressed her comment. I had given the answer by last night, right? So typically just expect that जो भी comments आप leave करेंगे after the video, asking your doubts or asking anything directly to me, right? So mostly through the day, by end of the day, I will be able to answer. Agar Bhagwan na kare, if I am not able to answer, then I will definitely keep it in mind and I will discuss it in my live sessions itself, so that there is some continuity amongst the viewers as well, right? All right, so let us start with today's discussion. So एक बहुत important decision आया है, right? And that decision is from Supreme Court of India. So they said that marginalized castes and tribal groups, they are heterogeneous and may need sub quotas, right? So let me explain this issue to you. अभी इंडिया के अंदर कैसा है दोस्तों कि we have, let's say, X percentage of seats and X percentage of jobs reserved for scheduled castes, right? And we have Y percentage of seats in education institutions and Y percentage of jobs, let's say, reserved for scheduled tribe. We have reservation for, similarly we have reservation for OBCs, right? And we have some reservations for economically weaker section within the so-called upper castes, right? Within the general population, right? So the idea over here is that हमने reservation तो बना दिया है X percentage, Y percentage, right? But the idea is now this X percentage is for the entire scheduled caste community, let's say. This is for entire scheduled tribe community, let's say. Within scheduled castes also there are different castes and not all of them are the same, right? So you have dominant social castes who are strong, powerful, so scheduled castes. You have dominant scheduled castes who are strong, powerful, affluent, educated, forward, right? And within scheduled caste itself, you have backward scheduled castes, right? Who are really backward, who are not educated, who have not seen empowerment, who have not seen any benefits major, let's say, that you typically want to have. ठीक है? So the idea over here is that scheduled caste को जब आप reservation देते हैं, तो there is this idea कि जो top level के जो scheduled castes हैं, right? Dominant scheduled castes हैं, resourceful scheduled castes हैं, वो लोग ये benefit corner कर लेते हैं और जो नीचे वाले scheduled castes हैं, so called, right? So they are not able to get the benefit. Those who are backward, those who are lacking behind, those who are more marginalized within scheduled castes, they are not able to get the benefits. So this is a problem that we need to solve. So what we need to do is that ये जो X percentage reservation दिया है, इसको हमारे को spread इस प्रकार से करना है that those who are marginalized, really marginalized among scheduled caste, they should get a sub quota, right? ताकि they are able to fill that sub quota and they are able to benefit from the sub quota. नहीं तो क्या होता है कि सारा का सारा benefit, हमारा understanding, हमारा अपर लेवल का या सुपरफिशियल अंडरस्टैंडिंग इज दैट सारा का सारा बेनिफिट्स जो है स्मॉल सेक्शन ऑफ शेड्यूल कास्ट जो है कॉर्नर कर लेता है एंड वेरी लार्ज सेक्शन डजंट गेट एनी बेनिफिट्स. दैट इज अवर सुपरफिशियल अंडरस्टैंडिंग, राइट? सेम गोज फॉर शेड्यूल ट्राइब्स, दैट जो भी बेनिफिट दिया है रिजर्वेशन का, सो देयर आर सर्टेन ग्रुप्स विद इन शेड्यूल ट्राइब्स हु हैव बीन एबल टू मूव अहेड एंड जो उनकी नेक्स्ट जनरेशन है एंड उनकी नेक्स्ट जनरेशन है, राइट, so they are affluent, resourceful, dominant, informed, aware, etc., so they are able to benefit, corner the benefits for the larger scheduled tribe community, and a lot of people are not able to benefit from those that reservation. Keep this basic understanding in mind. इससे आपको ये समझ में आ रहा है कि सुप्रीम कोर्ट क्या बोल रहा है, कि सुप्रीम कोर्ट इज सेइंग दैट मार्जिनलाइज्ड कास्ट ट्राइबल ग्रुप्स दे आर हेटेरोजीनियस, राइट, heterogeneous in the sense that they are more, some of them are more equal than others, right, that is what they mean by heterogeneous, that within tribal groups, scheduled tribes, let us say, certain groups are more equal than the others. Are you getting my point, right? So that's why सब कोटाज लेकर आएंगे कि इनका कोटा कम करेंगे और इनका कोटा बढ़ाएंगे, सिमिलरली इनका कोटा कम करेंगे और इनका कोटा बढ़ाएंगे, समथिंग लाइक दैट, राइट. नाउ डज दिस मेक सेंस? दैट इज अ क्वेश्चन. Does this sub quota make sense? Does this verdict of Supreme Court make sense? From an economics lens, does this make sense? Right. So that is what this article is trying to answer, and it's a very beautiful article. I will come back to this infographic later on. I'll surely come back to it, don't worry. Right. So we have already established why we are discussing this topic, that Supreme Court allowed states to subclassify scheduled castes and scheduled tribes for sub quotas. This is a tinderbox, right? It's extremely dangerous, right, to do this without proper data in the public domain. Why? Because there will be a lot of dharna, pradarshan, petition, corruption, political one-upmanship, right? There is going to be a lot of noise now because of this sub-classification business. Because आप क्या करेंगे ना, शेड्यूल कास्ट को शेड्यूल कास्ट से लड़ा देंगे, शेड्यूल ट्राइब को शेड्यूल ट्राइब से लड़ा देंगे. आई एम नॉट सेइंग इट कि आप जानबूझ के ये कर रहे हैं, आई एम नॉट सेइंग दैट एट ऑल, राइट, but this needs to be done in a very correct manner, right, using data, using researchers, using insights, using experts, such that things are acceptable to everybody, right. Rational मैंने आपको already बता दिया है, right, that within scheduled caste those who are marginalized, they should benefit. Within scheduled caste those who are affluent, they shouldn't benefit so much. That's the basic idea. Now let us test this idea from an economics lens. That's the idea over here, ठीक है. So अब इंडिया के अंदर दोस्तों there are more than 3000 castes, okay. 1/3 of these castes are scheduled castes. What is scheduled? What is the meaning of the word scheduled? So Government of India Act 1935 के अंदर, if I'm not wrong, Britishers for the first time they had identified certain castes and certain tribes, those who are really lagging behind, called scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, right. So the terminology has remained with us, ठीक है. So although we have 3000 castes, right, matlab, let's say within scheduled castes or within scheduled tribes we may have literally hundreds of castes, but we do not have their data, okay. Keep that in mind, because जो भी data India के अंदर collect होता है, that is collected at an aggregate level only in 4 buckets, right. So they don't ask me my caste in the sense कि भाई scheduled caste के अंदर exactly कौन सी caste है मेरी, या scheduled tribe के अंदर exactly कौन सी ट्राइब है मेरी, राइट. दे जस्ट आस्क मी दैट आप एससी हो या आप एसटी हो या आप ओबीसी हो या फिर आप सो कॉल्ड अदर्स हो. हुज अदर्स? द सो कॉल्ड अपर क्लास, द सो कॉल्ड सवर्णस, राइट. सो द आइडिया ओवर हियर इज दैट वी डू नॉट हैव कास्ट वाइज डेटा, वी हैव ओनली बकेट वाइज डेटा कि हाँ भैया आप एससी हो, आप एसटी हो, आप ओबीसी हो एंड आप अदर्स हो. सिर्फ हमारे पास ब्रॉड लेवल का डेटा है. कीप दैट इन माइंड, राइट, जस्ट कीप दिस इन माइंड, ठीक है. सो ये एक बहुत बड़ा लिमिटेशन है, राइट. इफ यू रियली वांट टू डू रिजर्वेशन एट द कास्ट लेवल, if you want to create sub quotas, you need a lot more data, you need a lot more survey, and you need it in the public domain. ये नहीं कि you do the socio-economic caste census 10 years ago and hide it, don't release it to the public for whatever good reasons that the Congress government had at that point of time and the BJP government had after taking power in 2014. If they wanted, they could have released that entire socio-economic caste survey ka data, but they chose not to release it, right. So this is not the way of going ahead, honestly speaking. Having said that, let us move ahead, right. So we will be talking about Gini coefficient, and we will be picking up household consumption expenditure survey ka data, right. Household consumption expenditure survey ka data के ऊपर we will be applying Gini coefficient to understand the level of inequality within scheduled castes. Because what is the idea? The idea is that within scheduled caste there is inequality. Some are affluent, some are marginalized. Hence, we need sub quota. That is the basic crux of the argument. I will repeat myself once again. What is the basic crux of the argument? The basic crux of the argument is that there is inequality within scheduled caste. Within scheduled caste, there are certain people who are affluent, there are certain who are marginalized. Those who are marginalized should be getting a sub quota. They should be getting something more than those who are affluent within scheduled caste. That is the basic crux of the argument, right? Now we need to see, we need to test that inequality, right? We need to see whether it exists. So how do we do that? So we can pick up the household consumption expenditure survey data that allows us to, map a Gini coefficient on that data. What is Gini coefficient, right? So this is a little bit of theory that I have highlighted in yellow for you, right? So if you want to measure inequality, you can do it using an index called Gini coefficient. Gini coefficient basically gives you a reading from 0 to 1. If you get a reading of 0, that means there is perfect equality. If you get a reading of 1, that means that there is perfect inequality. That means Gini coefficient जितना ज्यादा होगा उतनी ज्यादा inequality होगी. जितना Gini coefficient ज्यादा होगा इतनी inequality ज्यादा होगी, right? So that is how you have to read, right, the Gini coefficient. So this is a little bit of theory for you, right? Now let us see what Gini coefficient is telling us, right? So as I explained to you that we have monthly per capita expenditure ka data, right? So we have data for SCs, STs, right, OBCs and so on and so forth, right? So we have this MPCE का data, right? और इस पे हमने Gini coefficient लगा दिया है. So at a national level, India is a very unequal country. Gini coefficient of 0.317 is high, right? It's not low by any stretch of imagination. Okay, so 0.317 का Gini coefficient है at the national level, right? Others की अगर बात करें, if we look at only the so-called upper castes, right, Gini coefficient और भी ज्यादा high है 0.332, right? So within the Savarna so-called or within the so-called upper caste, there is even the most unequal category within India is the others category, right? Because you have some of the ultra richest of the richest HNIs, right? They are also a part of others or the so-called upper caste, and there are of course people who are working in odd jobs, etc. They are relatively poorer, right? If you look at other three groups, right? So scheduled caste का जो Gini coefficient है that is 0.275, scheduled tribe का जो Gini coefficient है that is 0.295, OBCs का जो Gini coefficient है that is 0.301. So who is the most unequal group within these four groups? It is the others group of the so-called dominant castes of the so-called upper castes, right? If you look at SCs, they are the least unequal because their Gini coefficient is 0.275 amongst these four groups. Keep that in mind, right? Keep that in mind. This is true for all the major states. ठीक है, हर एक स्टेट के अंदर ये पैटर्न है. So this is an established pattern, right? बिहार के अंदर you have the least inequality amongst the SCs because वहां पर Gini coefficient of scheduled caste is 0.197. महाराष्ट्र के अंदर you have the maximum inequality within scheduled caste. महाराष्ट्र के अंदर scheduled caste का जो Gini coefficient is 0.298, right? So state wise अगर आप देखेंगे तो variation है, but you have to realize that Bihar is the least unequal state of India and Maharashtra is the most unequal state of India. Now let me introduce one very important angle into this. Why is Bihar the least unequal state of India? Not because it is so fantastically socialistic, not because the redistribution policies are so fantastic. Bihar is least unequal because Bihar के अंदर opportunities for entrepreneurs, opportunities for extremely well-paying jobs किधर है, कितना है, कम है, with no disrespect, create करना पड़ेगा, right? So opportunities for moving ahead or zooming ahead are not so fantastic in Bihar, right? So as a result of which inequality to that extent is much lesser in Bihar. Maharashtra के अंदर you have Bombay, and in Bombay you know what happens, right? So the idea over here is that Maharashtra के अंदर inequality is higher because of the fact that people have been able to move so far ahead of others because of their own businesses, because of their jobs, etc., that inequality is high. I'm not justifying inequality, I'm just trying to help you understand, right? Having said that, right, let's move ahead, right? Now तो इससे तो ये समझ में नहीं आ रहा है सुप्रीम कोर्ट का वर्डिक्ट. वी आर नॉट एबल टू अंडरस्टैंड बिकॉज व्हाट इज द सुप्रीम कोर्ट वर्डिक्ट सेइंग दैट देयर इज इनइक्वालिटी अमंग शेड्यूल्ड कास्ट, देयर इज इनइक्वालिटी अमंग शेड्यूल्ड ट्राइब्स, सो लेट अस गो फॉर सब कोटास, राइट? बट शेड्यूल्ड कास्ट आर द लीस्ट अनइक्वल, right, amongst all the groups in India. So looking at household consumption expenditure survey and mapping a Gini coefficient on top of it, we will not be able to understand what's happening, right? So we are not able to make sense out of the Supreme Court's verdict. Now, how do you make sense of the Supreme Court's verdict? If you have detail on caste-wise representation in education and unemployment, in employment, that within scheduled caste कितने लोग education के अंदर है benefiting from reservation and कितने लोग employment के अंदर. So we need caste wise. So we need to break the sub schedule caste का data and see कितना कौन सा schedule caste कौन सा caste is benefiting how much. We don't have that, right? So we don't have that. So क्या करें, right? So let us look at it from another way. Okay. So another argument that is often made regarding schedule caste etc. is that affirmative action यानी कि जो reservation है, it should be based on economic position. It should not be based on caste identity. यानी कि जो reservation देना है, give it on the basis of income. Don't give it on the basis of caste. And कौन ये argument करता है? Those who are in the others category, right? कि हम भी गरीब है, हमें भी reservation मिलना चाहिए, right? Now let us test that at the macro level. Individually, some individuals may be correct, not denying that their experiences may be right, but let us look at the macro level, right? That should we give affirmative action on economic position rather than caste identity? If अगर ये question आपको पूछा जाता है in the interview, right? So what will be your answer, right? So your answer will be, I understand the question. The question is because there is apparently a creamy layer within scheduled caste and scheduled tribe, and there is extreme levels of poverty, let us say, amongst the so-called upper castes. That is why this question is getting asked. So that will be your first statement, right? So once you have made this statement, then you will your next statement will be that. But when we look at the data, when we look at the entire data, right? Data doesn't point in this direction. Let us look at the poorest 10% SCs and the richest 10%, poorest 10% of others, right? Poorest 10% of scheduled caste, their monthly expenditure is, let us say, 1600 rupees. Poorest 10% of others ka expenditure is 2000 rupees, right? Now let us look at the richest 10%. Richest 10% of SCs ka expenditure is 8900, let us say, and richest others ka jo expenditure hai, that is 15193. So given the fact that जो आपका poorest of others है, right? वो poorest of SC से काफी पीछे है, काफी आगे है, right? Because they are at 1600 and they are at 2000 over here. That's a huge difference, guys. It's a huge difference, right? Almost 30% का difference है. So you cannot say that poorest 10% of others and poorest 10% of SCs, right? They are at the same plane. You cannot say that. Okay. Neither can you confidently say that poorest 10% of others, right? They are, they deserve reservation as compared to, let us say, somebody who is in the third decile or fourth decile of SCs. Third decile or fourth decile of SCs का मतलब ये है 20 to 30% या 30 to 40% of the SCs. So it's extremely difficult. So the idea over here is that ये जो idea है कि let's give reservation on the basis of economic position, it doesn't, pass the test of data analysis, right? So the poorest among dominant castes, they are richer than the poorest amongst STs and SCs, right? So it's not making sense. Are you getting my point? The third aspect over here is that why is there a persistence of caste-based inequality in India? Why is it that caste is such a big problem? So caste is such a big problem in India because see what is happening. Scheduled caste, the scheduled tribe is 10% of our households. Scheduled caste is 20% of our households. OBCs is 45% of our households, and others are 25% of the households. So if you add up, 75% are scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, and OBCs. First of all, 75% of households in India are scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, and OBCs. Scheduled castes were the ones who were made to stay. They were the ones who were considered outside the caste system. They were the ones who were the most marginalized. Scheduled tribes, OBCs were the ones who were basically treated as Shudras, right? So their situation was almost as bad as that of the former untouchables, right? So the idea over here is that 75% of the households are in this category, right? अब देखो कैसा होता है ना कि we have created deciles, that this is the richest decile, right? And this is the poorest decile, and let us say this is the fourth decile, right? So let's say that this is 0 to 10%, okay? This is the fourth decile, meaning 11 to 20, 21 to 30, 31 to 40, right? So let's say that this is 31 to 40% or 30 to 40, and this is your last decile, that is 90 to 100, okay? नाउ टिपिकली इन अ कास्टलेस सोसाइटी, अगर आपकी सोसाइटी कास्टलेस होती तो हर एक ग्रुप हर एक डिकाइल के अंदर प्रेजेंट होता था, राइट? दीज आर द कंजम्पशन डिकाइल्स, ओके? हमारे पास जो मंथली पर कैपिटा कंजम्पशन एक्सपेंडिचर का जो डेटा है उसके बेसिस के ऊपर वी हैव क्रिएटेड दीज डिकाइल्स, बॉटम 10%, लेट्स से द फोर्थ डिकाइल एंड द टॉप 10%, राइट? तो टिपिकली हर एक डिकाइल के अंदर अगर schedule tribe is 10% of our population, then 10% of the lowest decile should be scheduled tribe, 10% of the fourth decile should be scheduled tribe, 10% of the top decile should be scheduled tribe. Similarly, if we have 20% scheduled caste households in India, then 20% of the bottom decile should be scheduled caste, 20% of the fourth decile should be scheduled caste, 20% of the top decile should be scheduled caste. But ऐसा है नहीं, ऐसा है नहीं दोस्तों। इंडिया के अंदर व्हाट हैपेंस इज दैट एससीज एंड एसटीज दे आर ओवर रिप्रेजेंटेड अमंग द पुअर एंड दे आर अंडर रिप्रेजेंटेड अमंग्स द रिच। आप डेटा देखिए, व्हाट डज द डेटा टेल यू? डेटा टेल्स यू दैट एसटीज एंड एससीज इज 30% ऑफ इंडियाज पॉपुलेशन, बट दे मेक अप 50% ऑफ द इंडियाज पुअरेस्ट 10%। यानी कि जो फर्स्ट डिकाइल है लेस देन 10% वाले, वो 50% एससीज एंड एसटीज है, despite the fact that SCs and STs in totality is only 30% of our population. If you look at the richest 10% of the population, only 13% only 13% belong to SCs and STs, 44% belongs to others. Others are your so-called upper castes. So you can clearly see over here the mapping of poverty and caste, right? I have spoken about inequality and caste, I have spoken about reservation, now I am speaking about poverty and caste. You can clearly see that both of them are going hand in hand, and this is what we need to break. Because see, what is happening is that all your important institutions, whether it is your parliaments or whether it is your regulators or whether it is your banks or whether it is your corporates or whether it is your education institutions, they are being dominated by the so-called others is upper caste, right? And your worldview is different from the reality of others. That is what others in the sense scheduled caste, scheduled tribe and OBCs. So if we really want to debate reservation, we can keep debating reservation. There is no end to it. As it is, there is an ever declining number of public jobs available going ahead, right? If we really want to solve this problem, if we really want to bring about social justice, then we need a lot of caste wise data. Supreme Court has given a ruling, fine, fantastic, let's clap for it, right? But to be able to meaningfully implement that ruling, to be able to identify ki, these castes, particularly these castes are lagging behind, and these are the ones who have really benefited a lot from affirmative action. They should not be getting significantly more benefit. They don't deserve it. Until and unless we have hardcore data, we will not be able to take any such policy measure which is acceptable to all, which is in the right direction, which is not controversial. This is, in that sense, a beautiful article written by Ishan Anand from IIT Delhi, right? It's a fantastic article that has been written. I hope that आपको काफी कुछ समझ में आया है. Now I want to just walk you through the infographic. I'll be zooming in so that you are able to clearly see the infographic. So this is the Gini coefficient mapping that we discussed. You can see that others का यानी कि the upper caste का inequality, if you check the inequality within the uppers group, so that's the highest in India, which is dragging the overall inequality up in India. Scheduled caste, scheduled tribe and OBCs के अंदर कम inequality है relatively speaking, right? If you look at Gini coefficient for scheduled caste and other groups, right? So you will see that in all the states you will see that scheduled caste के अंदर कम inequality है as compared to others, right? बिहार के अंदर लीस्ट है, महाराष्ट्र के अंदर हाईएस्ट है, right? Is something that we have already established. Okay. Then if you look at the marginalized groups, if you look at the monthly per capita spending, right? If you look at the monthly per capita spending, so first decile, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth and 10th decile, आप कोई भी decile उठा के देख लीजिए, right? So poorest among others जो है उनकी spending is above the other remaining groups. Poorest in the second decile के अंदर जो others है, they are above everybody else. Poorest amongst others in the third decile are above everybody else, right? Poorest among, let us say, the sixth decile, seventh decile, eighth decile, ninth decile, they are above the others, above the remaining groups. So that's what the basic idea over here is, that when we are looking at others, or when we're looking at upper castes, they are doing better than scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, OBC, irrespective of which decile you're looking at, right? Irrespective of which decile you're looking at, scheduled tribe, scheduled caste is the one, scheduled tribe is the one who is the lowest, right? They are the ones who are the lowest in terms of monthly per capita expenditure, irrespective of which decile you are looking at. This is the problem that India needs to solve, right? India's poorest decile is composed of marginalized caste groups, right? So this is your poorest decile, right? You can see that almost 80% plus of it is comprising of non-other or non-other caste, right? And you can clearly see that the representation of upper caste, which is in gray, starts increasing as you go higher and higher above in your deciles, right? It clearly shows the nexus between casteism and poverty. In that sense, I teach a lot of theory, I teach a lot of academic stuffs in our classes in Ecoholics, so that the students have a good base. I can tell you, I can vouch for myself, I have never taught this topic of poverty, of inequality, of casteism, as well as I have done today, using this particular article as a base of discussion. This is the power of this discussion. It is extremely beautiful. It is extremely relevant, extremely important, right? So this is the question that ideally you should try to answer. That analyze Supreme Court's recent decision to allow states to subclassify SC, ST groups for subquotas. Using the household consumption expenditure survey data, assess whether this decision addresses intra-group economic disparities effectively. The operational word over here is effectively. That does the survey data say that this decision will be able to address economic disparities effectively? That is the question that you need to ponder over. So this is my one article done, right? I have one left over from yesterday's discussion. I would like to pick that up. So this discussion is on NPS, OPS, and UPS, right? Now, again, let me just give you a very quick, revision of what this entire debate is. So, you know that government employees, they receive pension, right? At the end of their professional life, when they retire, they get a monthly pension, right? We are talking only about 3% of India's workforce. Please remember that. We are talking merely about, I think, 3% of India's workforce is benefiting from this kind of pension. Rest 97%, remember, rest 97% of India's population who is retiring, they don't get any pension, assured pensions, right? So we are talking about the elites within India's employees. We are talking about elites. Government servants are elites in that sense, right? Elites के बारे में बात कर रहे हैं हम, ठीक है? So there was this old pension scheme. Old pension scheme के अंदर there was zero contribution from the employees, and the pension that they were getting was assured, right? So zero and assured. That is old pension scheme. In the new pension scheme that was created, so employees were not contributing zero, so they were contributing some amount of money. So let's put it at one over here, right? And they were not getting assured pension. They were getting, let us say, market driven pension, right? Market determined pension. Market determined pension मतलब कि जो भी पैसा इकट्ठा हुआ, contribution of employees plus contribution of employers towards pension of employees, जो भी पैसा इकट्ठा हुआ उसको हम स्टॉक मार्केट में लगाएंगे. स्टॉक मार्केट का जो भी रिटर्न्स जनरेट होंगे उसके बेसिस के ऊपर पेंशन जो है डिवाइड कर दी जाएगी, राइट? सो यू डू नॉट हैव अश्योर्ड पेंशन एंड यू आर नॉट कंट्रीब्यूटिंग जीरो. Obviously, this is a solution which was unacceptable to government employees. Why? This was unacceptable because they said that we want assured pension, right? And nobody wants to contribute to their pension, right? Nobody wants to contribute to their security, right? Then there is now this idea of unified pension scheme, this new idea which the government is going to move ahead with, right? In this new idea, you need to contribute some amount of money as an employee. So your contribution will not go to zero, but government's contribution is increasing, right? Keep that in mind. I will come to that point, that government was contributing, let us say 14.5% over here, right, of the employee's salary towards his or her pension. Now in this particular scheme, government will be contributing 18% towards the pension of the employees. Okay, so the government's contribution is increasing. Employees will continue to contribute 10%, I think, right? And the pension will be assured. Pension will be assured, right? Assured meaning that the amount will be assured. Whatever markets can generate, markets will provide, right? And if the market is providing less than what has been assured, then government will chip in, right? So government ka expenditure towards pension has increased in two ways. Number one, upfront contribution of the government has increased from 14.5 to 18%. एंड नंबर टू, ये जो हमने अश्योर कर दिया है, ये जो हमने अश्योर कर दिया है, उसके अंदर गवर्नमेंट का कंट्रीब्यूशन विल इंक्रीज, राइट? बिकॉज इफ द मार्केट डिटरमाइंड कंट्रीब्यूशन इज लेस इन एनी ईयर, विच कैन हैपन, बिकॉज स्टॉक मार्केट है, कभी भी क्रैश हो सकता है. स्टॉक मार्केट है, 5 साल तक परफॉर्म नहीं करेगा, क्या गारंटी है? यू आर नॉट गोइंग टू हैव booming stock market or a bullish stock market for the rest of your life every year, year after year, right? It is going to stagnate at some point of time. It is going to collapse at some point of time, right? So at that point, in those years, government ka jo outgo hai, it is going to be massive. We don't even know what that is, but it is going to be massive, right? So this is what you need to know before you read this article. Now let's read this article, right? So it is very unfortunate, right, that we have we are junking this national pension system, which I was calling as new pension system. So sorry about that, right? So ये national pension system को जो है we are junking, right? It was applicable for 20 years. So 2004 में इसको लागू करा था. So from 2004 to 2024 this system was applicable, right? Now we have gone from NPS to UPS. So is it a minor tweak or is it a fundamental change? That is what we are trying to answer, right? Now answer depends upon how you want to look at things, right? If you want to say that earlier government was contributing 14%, now it is contributing 18.5%, it is a minor tweak. But this is an incomplete story. This is an incomplete story, right? Government's contribution earlier was only 10% in NPS, then it became 14%, now it has become 18.5%, right? And now this new scheme is offering assured income or assured pension. That means that in this UPS, in the unified pension scheme, if you are retiring as a government employee, right, then you will get 50% of the average salary drawn in the last year before retirement as pension, right? 50% of the average salary drawn in the last year will be your pension for the rest of your life. That amount will keep increasing to a certain extent, right? अगर आपने 25 साल की सेवा करी है तो आपको ये मिलेगा. इफ यू हैव वर्कड फॉर लेस, देन you will not get 50%, maybe you will get 45%, 40%, 35%, 30%, depending upon the number of years that you have put in, right? So this 50% का assurance is so much like the old pension scheme. वहां पर भी last salary का half drawn salary becomes your pension, right? So in that sense UPS, it is not a minor tweak, right? बट हमने पूरे तरीके से अबैंडन कर दिया है दिस प्रिंसिपल ऑफ नो अश्योरेंस, राइट? टेल मी वन थिंग, if I retire from corporate sector after putting in 40 years of back-breaking work, right, is my pension assured? No. If I am retiring after 40 years of back-breaking work as an agricultural laborer, is my pension assured? No. If I am retiring from the private sector in lower capacities after putting 40 years of back-breaking work, is my pension assured? No, right? My pension is not assured. So why should government employees ka pension be assured is something that I will never understand, right? So this transition that was done from old pension to national pension system, this was a very important reform. 10 साल लगे थे ये debate को. Dave committee gave the first set of recommendations in 1994 and finally in 2004 we went to NPS, right? OPS was about defined benefits. OPS के अंदर your benefits were defined, your benefits were fixed. NPS के अंदर your contribution was defined, your contribution was fixed, and the benefit dependent upon market returns, right? अगर अपन ने इस रिफॉर्म को 30-40 साल 50 साल चलने दिया होता, national pension scheme had been applicable for 50 years, then we would have generated actual long-term data to take a decision whether it is working or not working. But we have junked this reform only in 20 years. It's a very short period of time for any pension scheme to be able to prove whether it is working or not working, right? OPS के अंदर employee contribution was zero. NPS के अंदर both employee and employer are contributing, right? And the idea is that stock market perform करेगा, right? And you will get a decent amount of pension, right? Government employees, they have retirement access to provident fund too, right? So you build this up along with your this thing with your employer, and वहां पर जो rate of interest that is determined by the RBI, right, or the finance ministry. So you have provident funds also. So you have provident funds which is there with you. Okay. Now the point over here is that the principle of employee contribution, right, it is there, right. So employee contribution is there, but जो assured income का जो element है, right, so uska jo liability upon the government hai, that is going to be heavy. Like I said to you, that the pension is assured. What if markets don't perform, right? So this is a slippery slope. Aaj government is contributing 18.5%. Tomorrow somebody will pressurize the government, and you have to realize that government employees are a very small minority of workers in India, but they're extremely united, extremely vocal, and extremely powerful, because they are constantly nagging the ministers, they are constantly nagging the bureaucrats, right? So it is a self-serving mechanism, right? So आज 18.5% है government's contribution. Tomorrow it can be forced up to 28%. Who knows, right? And apart from that, there is always a dearness allowance or inflation adjustment which is there, right? So you will keep increasing these numbers up, and only up, right? So essentially what is happening is that we have gone almost all the way back to OPS, where the government's liability, where the government's expenditure on pension is going to be huge, right? It's going to be huge. And this is something that we need to be worried about, right? 97% ऑफ इंडिया की वर्कफोर्स को कोई मतलब नहीं है ओपीएस यूपीएससी, उनको कुछ नहीं मिलने वाला है. Remaining 3% of the government employees, they are the ones who are benefiting from all this, right? अभी की बात करें, so 18.2 combined जो भी सरकार का revenue receipts है, I hope you know the meaning of the term revenue receipts, right? So whatever money you earn through taxes, through fines, through penalties, through dividend, through profit, through interest, right, that is your revenue receipt. So आज के दिन सरकार का जो भी revenue receipt है, उसका 18.2% is already being spent on pension. और pension किसको जा रही है? 3% of India's workforce को, right? So we are spending 18.2% of the combined revenue of union and states towards pension. This number will only go up because of UPS. ऐसा क्या काम कर दिया है गवर्नमेंट एम्प्लॉइज ने that they deserve 20% of India, government of India and government of states का revenue expenditure in the form of pension? Bhai, you have gotten salary for 30 years, you have saved money, you have educated your kids are working, right? कुछ you have saved, कुछ they will provide, काम होएगा ना? And नहीं है तो you can always do something extra on the sides, right? Who is stopping you, right? So the point over here is that if you look at this, right, कि going ahead revenue का, government के revenue का huge amount of money is going to go towards pension. Average pension paid in the country today is nearly 6 lakh per annum, right? And OPS के ऊपर जैसे ही आप जाओगे assured income पे जाओगे, so it will increase much more. 6 lakh rupees per annum, right, is the pension that is getting paid, right? So you have to see what you want to do with it, right? Since 1991, share of states revenue paying for pension has gone up from 7.9 to 27.4%, right? 27.4. सिर्फ states की अगर बात करें, states के अंदर revenue का 27.4% is going towards pension, right? So when you are spending so much on pension, you don't have money for roads, you don't have money for hospitals, you don't have money for public schools, you don't have money for public spaces, you don't have money for taking care of climate change, pollution and whatnot, right? So there is this huge problem over here, and the conclusion is that 97% of non-government workers, unborn generation, will pay higher taxes so that government employees can get assured incomes, right? जो NPS को डिजाइन करा गया था, it was designed in such a manner, right, कि government की liability को zero कर दिया जाए going ahead, right? And that was the right thing to do so that government can spend on other items. पैसा बचा के government कुछ करने वाली नहीं है, they will spend on other items, right? So what happened? Why is it that NPS failed? NPS failed because of one very simple reason, right? Simple reason ये था कि जो transition वाला batch था, they didn't get time. So somebody who was just 10 years away from retirement, they were forced to switch from OPS to NPS in 2004, right? They were forced to switch. And 10 साल के अंदर स्टॉक मार्केट का परफॉर्मेंस वगैरह सब जोड़ जाड़ के आपका पेंशन अच्छा बना नहीं, राइट? तो ये जो ट्रांजिशन बैच था ना, they were the ones who were losing out in a big way, right? And they were very angry and they were very, anguished, right? So new employees in the government, they don't know what old pension scheme was, so they don't know, they don't have a comparison benchmark, right? And they are savvy, okay, they understand the markets, okay? So it is not the new employees who had a problem, it is this transition batch that had a problem. ये ट्रांजिशन बैच को जो है हमारे को थोड़ा सा बेटर टेक केयर करना चाहिए था, शायद एनपीएस बच जाता था, राइट? बिकॉज जो न्यू जनरेशन है दे वुडंट हैव नोन व्हाट ओपीएस इज, जो ओल्ड जनरेशन है वो खत्म हो जाती थी, और जो ट्रांजिशन जनरेशन है उनको संभाल लेना चाहिए था, उनको हमने संभाला नहीं, उन्होंने विरोध प्रदर्शन करा, सब कुछ करा, एंड NPS is now being junked in favor of UPS. I've already explained how difficult it is going to be from an economic standpoint. Evaluate the recent changes in national pension system in India, comparing with the previous old pension scheme. Discuss the implication of these changes for fiscal sustainability and pension equity. आज का मेरा डिस्कशन लंबा डिस्कशन था, दोनों आर्टिकल्स बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट थे. I am very sure that you need to have a 101% complete understanding of both these issues. You are very likely to find these issues in your examination. With this, we'll bring this session to an end. Thank you so much. All the best and Jai Hind to all of you. Thank you so much.